London.
Hello and welcome. I'm Samara and you're watching the NewsX Eurozone. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. Ukrainian and US officials have said that Russia must demonstrate a serious commitment to peace as their talks in Miami enter a third day today, while European leaders weigh using frozen Russian assets to support Kyiv. Ukraine's state railway company has said that a Russian drone and missile strike hit a major rail hub in Fastiv near Kyiv, damaging a depot and multiple carriages but causing no reported casualties. The attack comes as Russia and Ukraine intensify strikes on each other's energy and infrastructure targets. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has removed his former Chief of Staff, Andriy Yermak, from the National Security Council amid a sprawling corruption investigation that has rocked Kyiv. Yermak is also no longer a member of the Stavka, the high command of Ukraine's armed forces, according to two presidential decrees. German lawmakers have approved the government's plan to attract more military recruits as the country tries to boost the ranks of its armed forces in the face of rising concerns about the threat posed by Russia. The plan also foresees mandatory medical checks for young men as young as 18 years of age. Today, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz is to first visit Jordan before heading for Jerusalem later in the day. In Jordan, Chancellor Merz is to hold bilateral talks with Jordanian King Abdullah II. Dutch minister admits being blindsided by China's retaliation in Xperia's chip crisis. Karamans faces criticism after being choked off chip flows and scrutiny of his move to invoke a Cold War-era security law. The IAEA has warned that the Chernobyl nuclear plant's protective shield, built in 2019 to contain radiation from the 1986 disaster, has lost its primary safety functions. After an alleged Russian drone strike, IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi has said that the repairs have begun, but full restoration is critical. Nigel Farage to rally in Scotland as Reform UK gains ground ahead of elections. The right-wing politician Nigel Farage is set to address supporters today, aiming to capitalise on Reform UK's unexpected rise in Scotland ahead of May's devolved Parliament elections, as the anti-immigration party is now polling second behind the SNP. Now, for this hour, we start with Germany. Germany's Foreign Minister Johann Wadephul has said that Berlin does not need external advice on how to run its own domestic affairs. Speaking in Berlin, he made it clear that issues like freedom of expression and how German society is organized are guided by only Germany's constitution, not by comments from the US. His remarks came after the new US national security strategy criticized Europe and warned of civilizational erasure. Meanwhile, in Qatar, EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas also said that the US is still Europe's biggest ally, even if Washington's new strategy is tough on Europe. She has also added that Europe must be more confident, especially when dealing with Russia. Kallas has also warned that any peace deal forcing Ukraine to give up land will not bring lasting peace, saying that rewarding aggression will only encourage more conflict around the world. For this discussion, we welcome Mr. Glenn Grant. He's a former advisor to Defense Minister of Ukraine, joins us live from Riga. Thank you very much, Glenn, for joining us again. Good to see you. Thank you. Now, Glenn, how is this US's national, the script or the script that came out yesterday, but from US President Donald Trump, how is this seen in Europe, as we have heard John Wadephul be critical or criticize about criticize it and also say that they don't want any interference or critics from foreign government?
I think the main thing about it, if you're European, for example, is that this security strategy is very pro-Trump ideas, and it doesn't do anything to actually to pull together allies, to make allies feel that they're allies. In fact, it's highly critical of Europeans, and this is in complete contrast to previous security strategies, which have all talked about the inclusion of NATO, the inclusion of allies, and the need for strength through collective working. And this is now pushing people away, which is not exactly making very many friends in European capitals.
Why do you think, what does the timing suggest of this? Don't you think this jeopardizes, as you also mentioned, that this does not help with helping Ukraine or getting allies in Europe? What do you think, how do you think this is jeopardizing the ceasefire efforts made by US?
Well, you have to go back to the beginning. There are no ceasefire efforts. Let's be blunt about this and stop calling it a peace plan or a ceasefire. We've been talking about this for a year, and nothing in Putin's side has changed. Secondly, nothing on Trump's side has changed. He is supporting Putin, and anybody who thinks otherwise is being foolish. And therefore, this is very much not just a pro-Trump, but a pro-Putin security strategy, which is trying to reorder the world structure, where Russia and America are on the same side and Europe is not. And it doesn't take much reading of this to see that. So it will jeopardize peace talks. It will jeopardize everything because Trump is clear that he wants Ukraine to lose to Russia, because he's supporting Russia. And therefore, when you read it with this in mind, you will understand all the things that are going on.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. Glenn, please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, moving on, a major railway hub near Kyiv has been damaged in a large-scale Russian drone and missile attack overnight, according to Ukraine's state railway operator. The strike hit the town of Fastiv, damaging a depot and multiple rail cars. No casualties have been reported, but several suburban train routes near Kyiv and in Chernihiv have been cancelled. Russia's defense ministry has said that it carried out a massive strike using long-range missiles, Kinzhal hypersonic weapons, and swarms of drones. Moscow claims it targeted Ukrainian military-industrial facilities and energy sites supporting their operations. Ukrainian officials say the attacks were aimed at critical civilian infrastructure, including power stations and heating facilities across at least 8 regions in Ukraine's military reported. Russia launched more than 650 drones and over 50 missiles, with air defenses intercepting most of them. Thousands are without heat and water in Odessa, while port infrastructure there has also been damaged. Emergency crews are carrying out repairs where conditions allow as blackouts continue across the country. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Mr. Glenn Grant. He's a former advisor to Defense Minister of Ukraine, joins us live from Riga. Thank you very much, Glenn, for staying with us. Now, what more can you tell us about this intensifying Russian attack on Ukraine, and especially the latest attack on the railway station or railway tracks?
Okay, well, in many ways, it's not an intensifying. What it is a focusing. In other words, what they've been doing is taking 3 or 4 days without firing very much, but keeping the population up by flying 1 drone or 2 drones over Kiev, over somewhere else, that keeps people awake and down in the bunkers, but doesn't actually cause much destruction. And then hitting Ukraine with a mass of weapons all on the same night, which overwhelms the air defense systems. And they are focusing completely upon civilian infrastructure, civilian energy facilities, and those things that actually help normal society exist, one of which now is the railway system. because the railways have been very fundamental to travel in and around Ukraine, because of course many of the poorer people don't have cars. So it's either the bus or the train. And if you can destroy the train infrastructure, then you're actually going to harm a lot of things, including transport of the military.
And how, you mentioned that now the tactic by Russia has changed to not intensifying, but drone attacks, one or two, and then a big one in 2 or 3 days again. So how is this affecting the morale of people over there?
Funny enough, much less than you would imagine. I mean, I was in a supermarket when all the lights went out, and everybody just turned on their phones and carried on shopping just the same as normal. I haven't seen any change in the morale of people in the last 3 years. What I have seen is that they're becoming much more stubborn and much more angry about what Russia is doing, and in some ways also angry about their own government for not doing enough to get back at Russia. But I don't think that this method or these attacks are going to actually to damage the will of the Ukrainian people at all. If anything, it'll be the reverse.
Wow, that's amazing to hear. How do you see this change occurring, in this mentality and the resilience of people in Ukraine? And how long do you think that will take for them to, maybe ask for the government to change, or ask for the government to maybe go harder on Russia?
That's a good question. I mean, I think that what has changed? Well, now when one of the attacks comes, you see everybody heading towards the bunkers. They've got a camping stool. They've got their rucksack with them. They've got food with them for the night. Many have got sleeping bags, and if they know it's a big attack, some even take a small tents down into the metro and spend the whole night there sleeping. And you see this all the time, and you see people running, of course, to get into the bunkers. But that's part of life now. I don't think that because they're Ukrainians, I do not think that they're going to want to attack population in Russia. It's not their way of working. They will want government and military to continue to attack military facilities until they've degraded the ability of Russia to fight back.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Glenn Grant for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, moving on, Qatar's Energy Minister Saad Al-Kaabi has said that he was hopeful that the European Union would resolve companies' concerns over its sustainability laws by the end of December. Qatar has aired its frustration with EU's corporate sustainability due diligence directive and has threatened to halt gas supplies. The dispute centers around CSDDD's potential to fine violators up to 5% of total global revenue, while Kaabi has reported that and said that Qatar would not reach net zero emission targets. Kaabi has also said that global gas demand would remain strong, citing rising energy needs from artificial intelligence, and projected that LNG demand would reach 600 to 700 million tons per annum by 2035. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Mr. Glenn Grant. He's a former advisor to Defense Minister of Ukraine, joins us live from Riga. Thank you very much, Glenn, for staying with us. Now, looking at this, how might Qatar's threat to halt gas supplies, how do you think this will have influence on EU's approach on enforcing its sustainability directive?
We are in a challenging time at the moment as far as gas and oil is concerned. I think there are a lot of people, especially in the EU, who are not completely sure how this is all going to balance out. Because, of course, what they've been doing is trying to reduce to zero the amount of gas that is taken from Russia. That's the first thing, which means taking gas from other sources. They've made that as an EU law, but that hasn't yet come into force. And the next thing then is oil. and taking oil. And now what this means, of course, is that there are countries like Qatar, countries even like Venezuela, countries around the world that are going to want to pick up the slack for the EU. But the EU has got extremely strong rules, and some of these countries do not fit the governance rules for oil and gas that the EU wants. So I think that there's a lot of work to be done in the coming months as Russian gas and oil disappear and future partners, new partners, come online to make sure that that the EU can function. Remembering that Germany needs huge amounts of oil.
Right. And Glenn, how should in this critical moment, how do you think should Europe diversify dependence on countries like Qatar, while they reject or they openly say that they're not able to abide by the sustainability directive? And then there's Russia, and then there is Iran. All these countries, or also Venezuela, like you mentioned, all these countries who have their own, they don't have the democracy that Europe stands for.
This is a really good point. I mean, and it puts the EU governors, the EU Parliament, into a really difficult position, because you're getting rid of oil and gas from Russia, but then you've got to take oil and gas from somewhere else, like Qatar, and countries that do not meet EU rules and regulations, EU specifications, EU's values. And so there will be a lot of pressure on EU as an organization from individual countries like Germany, France, Poland, who actually need increasing amounts of energy as time goes on. And do they take it from countries they don't like? Well, frankly, Hobson's choice. You don't have any choice. They will have to start taking it from countries that do not meet the EU rules and regulations, or the EU will dry up. It won't get enough gas.
Is there any way that EU can pressure these countries to abide by the EU's law or regulations? Or is there any country that's capable of, abiding while also providing whatever Europe needs in terms of energy?
That is a good question, and I'm not sure whether that will be necessarily a country thing that changes, or whether it will be individual businesses within countries, companies that actually make a decision. We want to sell to the European Union, therefore we must meet the rules and regulations. Please, can we change our own laws? Because the EU is such a huge market that there are many countries that can't afford not to trade with the EU. So I see a lot of discussions in smoky rooms coming up in the next year or two about the transactions of oil and gas, but between not just the EU but other countries as well.
Yes, this is indeed such a challenging, time, and also Europe is facing this difficult challenge of getting energy from, or protecting their energy facilities from getting from where they agree with. Yes. With that, I would like to thank Glenn Grant for joining us today as a former advisor to Defense Minister of Ukraine from Riga. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now we move on to our next news. The possible confiscation of Russian frozen assets in the European Union could impact the euro's role as a global reserve currency. According to experts, euro-dominated assets account for around 20% of foreign exchange reserves held by central banks worldwide, and in this respect, the euro is second only to the US dollar, which accounts for almost 60% of global foreign exchange reserves. However, if the EU decides to seize Russia's frozen assets, central banks and private investors will begin to doubt whether it is worth buying European securities. Meanwhile, the United States is trying to block the reparations loan developed by the European Commission, which involves the expropriation of Russian assets, as it will also affect dollar. This comes as the European Commission proposed an alternative to the expropriation of Russian assets in the form of a 90 billion euro loan, which would cover 2/3 of Kyiv's needs. Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Dr. Ajay Dua. He's a former Secretary of Commerce and senior economist, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Dr. Ajay, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking at this, how could this confiscation of frozen Russian assets affect global confidence in euro as a reserve currency?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
As you mentioned earlier, as of now, 20% of the reserves in the various banks, the global banks, is accounted for by euro-denominated assets. And 20% is fairly sizable, certainly not as large as the dollar ones, which amount to about 60%. That's the estimate which the Financial Times has talked about. I think one would need to be extremely careful before the global currency system itself goes into a bit of a toss. It is a TASS newspaper in Russia which reported it, and so perhaps a similar sounding name, a word I have used, goes for a spin.
Yes.
I would be very careful that the central banks of the world in some way, the European Bank, European, get impacted by such a move as to freeze the assets. Why is the freezing of the asset being done? Because there is need, and now that the US has been backing out or been changing its stance about supporting purchase of weapons by Ukraine, the burden is falling more on the European countries. They need money to support Ukraine. A way out which they had, or the European Commission had found, was why not freeze the assets of Russia, which align with euro-denominated currencies in various banks. I think some other alternative would need to be found if the Europeans do really want to help Ukraine to the extent the estimates have been put, because it's not just the Financial Times which has reported the kind of wariness of following in this model, but even across the Atlantic, from the US also, there are calls for caution, because it could even affect, once the currency system to an extent of 20% takes a hit, almost the whole system tends to get into aberrations. So that even the dollar-denominated assets would get into a difficulty. So they also are warning, or it might do the entire monetary system good if they were not to proceed with the freezing of the assets, Russian assets, merely to finance the need for facilitating Ukraine to buy more arms. Some other ways and means would need to be found by them.
Yes, and I would like to bring U.S. into this picture, Dr. Ajay. Why might the United States seek to block the EU's reparation loan plan, and how could this dispute impact transatlantic economic cooperation, and also how will it affect dollar?
It would affect the dollar largely because of the fact that euro and dollars are fungible. They can be exchanged very easily. Assets today valued in dollars can be tomorrow moved to the euro-denominated ones, and vice versa. There is, in this present scheme of things which we have in the global order, no currency really is by itself. Shifting from one currency to the other has become with a click of a button, virtually, to say that. So the moment some action takes place on the euro takes a hit, the American system would, linked as the two are, would also feel the pain. And probably if the dollar takes a hit, because 60% of the assets are in dollar terms, the euro currency will definitely be hit, and much more than the dollar. So with this interconnectivity being there in the monetary systems across the Atlantic, I think this, I would call it a well-knit currency system, well-knit reserve system. The one has to study and take into account how the interconnections will play out. So the US also not wanting to be hit, and US, as we all know, is facing, the US dollar is facing a huge crisis of its own because of the $3 trillion of debt which is required to service this during the current year, and they are even talking of deals with Venezuela, which till very recently was, the two were not on the same page or not well aligned.
Yes.
With that kind of desperation in the US, I think the US is advising caution, and that caution should well be taken care of by all the interconnected currency operators.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Dr. Aji Dua for joining us as a former Secretary of Commerce and Senior Economist from New Delhi. Thank you very much. Now we move on to our next news. The CEO of the Milan court in 2026 Winter Olympics has said that there is still significant work to be done with just 2 months remaining before the Games begin. Speaking in Rome as the Olympic flame prepared to start its relay, Andrea Vernier has said that finishing touches at several venues are ongoing but expected at this stage. He has added that the relay's launch brings the right energy needed for the final 60 days of preparations. The main concern remains the Santa Giulia Arena in Milan, still an active construction site and set to host much of the Olympic ice hockey tournaments, including the return of NHL players after 12 years. Organizers have confirmed a key test event from January 9th to 11th, with 7 club matches scheduled to put the venue through its paces. Despite the challenges, ticket sales are strong. Officials say 850,000 of the 1.4 million available tickets have already been sold, with new batches released every few weeks. And that's a wrap on the NewsX Eurozone. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.